Okay, so this will be the last section, or the last online section for truck pert. Loss control, I just want you to understand, or at the end of this, you're going to demonstrate basic understanding of salvage and overhaul equipment and methods, which we'll talk about both the equipment we use in salvage and some of the methods that you'll be using during your operation. For hands-on training, there really isn't anything we're going to do for you guys on the training grounds as far as loss control. Though this should have been a few of the basics you've learned in your essentials program, just referring back to whenever you're folding tarps and also deploying salvage tarps. So that pretty much is the section that lines up with this area of truck pert. Just understand that the real reason for loss control, we're trying to minimize the damage that's going to occur, or that the homeowner or building owner is going to need to deal with either at or during the end of the incident or at the end of the incident. So this loss control can happen both before, during, and after an incident. So I think sometimes loss control may not always be a tactile actual function. If you attack from the unburnt side towards the burnt side, you're trying to limit the fire spread within the building. In theory, that's a type of loss control. If you open a window instead of forcing or breaking a window, that's loss control. If you decide not to cut the roof, maybe the incident is under control and there was no need to open the roof, and that's also loss control because you're limiting the damage that would have been caused by either the fire or by the fire department. So salvage, that's just methods and operating on the scene. So you're trying to reduce both the primary and secondary damage during these operations. Salvage can start as soon as we have enough people working on the scene to really switch into that operation. Also think salvage or damage control or loss control will be something as simple as closing doors in the interior of the structure. So if you're working on the second floor, and let's say the fire's in a bathroom or a bedroom on the second floor, when you get upstairs you do a quick search and you start closing doorways. So even closing the door, limiting the spread of smoke within the interior of the structure is still a form of salvage, and you're doing this before we actually switch from an operational mode of fire attack to a mode of salvage. So there's both primary and secondary damage that may occur within a building. Primary damage generally is caused by the fire. Then secondary damage is caused or as a result of suppression activities. Maybe force went through the building, water application, so for flowing master streams within the building, or even working with a hand line on the second floor and the water comes down through the ceiling onto the first floor. That's just secondary damage, and there's really nothing we can do to limit that. At least, the occurrence of that secondary damage. Now, there is also salvage and overhaul operations we can do. At least salvage operations, we can try to limit the amount of damage. So overhaul generally consists of origin cause determination, or looking deep into the building, really tearing the building apart. So I've had an issue before with rekindles, and to me a rekindle is just a fire department that did not do their job properly, that they got lazy on their overhaul, and that they should have dug into the building a little bit deeper. So if it's still smoldering or there's still smoke, then there's fire in there somewhere. You got to tear the building apart to the level that you can find all visible fire, all visible smoke. You look on your thermal imaging camera, you look at the temperature, and you stay there and you wait until those temperatures start reducing. And if you need to, you can add water to it, or you can just open the building up a little bit further. But truly, overhaul is the real work of the fire ground, and that's where we really have to dig into things. So with salvage procedures, so we can start, as I said before, at the same time as fire attack. So we're trying to really contain everything within the building, or maybe in the room below the fire. So as we said before, if the water is leaking down through the ceiling, and we may move all the contents to one area and start covering those. You may take furniture, lift it up off the floor, try and get it out of the water. Before you salvage or open up. So you see what this fireman's doing here is starting to pull the ceiling. So before I pull the ceiling, I want to move all the furniture out from that area. I've had incidents before where we started overhauling a bedroom. So the first thing we did was we pulled back the blankets on the bed, took everything that was valuable, threw it on the bed, all the clothes on the bed, and then covered everything back up with the sheet, put a tarp over top of that, and then we went into our salvage or our overhaul operations. So with the salvage, as I said before, try to move everything to the center of the room, or at least get it out of the way of wherever the water is coming through the ceiling or wherever you're going to create some sort of a damage. Just try to move the furniture and all the personal items out of that area. You've seen this before. You've completed these operations in your basics program. It just shows one firefighter spreading a tarp or a salvage cover over. I think this looks like a couch. This is a review of a one person or a two person. It really is just going to depend on how we store your salvage tarps in the apparatus. You know that on Truck 5.1 they are stored in a rolled orientation. With one firefighter, can roll that tarp out over top of something. If you do have two firefighters, it makes it a little bit easier when you start to fold it out. We have other options for our salvage covers, so we can use those to make runners within the building. You can see for this one, it's a somewhat of a catch-all, trying to catch water coming off the ceiling, and then using that into a water chute and trying to get it moved outside the building. Along with salvage activities, even after the incident, you'll see on this building the doors and windows have been closed up. The main reasons for that is just to keep people out and protect the scene inside. You're not sure when the fire investigator may show up on the scene or an insurance company, so we're really just trying to keep everything secure as best we can. On this picture, you'll see a fireman is using the wood slats and the tar paper that we carry on the trucks. So this is after a vertical ventilation hole has been opened. Now they're going to go back with those wood slats and tar paper and try to seal things up, at least keep the weather out until a construction company can get on the scene, or the insurance company can get workers there to start fixing the problem. For this picture, they're using a tarp and also those slats to cover that opening. So one is using tar paper and the other one is using a plastic tarp. For overhaul, as I said before, this is just really digging in, trying to find any hidden fire, trying to limit the potential for rekindles. You got to expose everything, or at least in the area of origin or any area that's smoking or showing heat signatures on the thermal imaging camera. Those areas got to be opened up and they need to cool down. So there are different tools we can use for overhaul operations. You can use the pike pull or plaster hooks. With that, just understand the different hooks that we have on the trucks. So I'm just thinking Truck 5.1 has both a New York hook, which works great for pulling lath or opening up, moving floorboards, opening baseboard, opening trim around windows and doors. And then we also carry a drywall hook. So if you think about the way drywall is constructed, it's more like a gypsum wallboard. We're having a bigger end on the hook. Works best for the drywall. You will use axes for opening up the walls and the floors. Remember, on the engine and also on the trucks, we carry a metal bucket with the asbestos bag used to carry debris from the structure. Shovels, bale hooks, pitchforks, thermal imaging camera, just all tools you can use for overhaul operations. Again, once the fire is knocked down, you got to really dig in and get after it, and that's what we're going to refer to as the true overhaul operations. So during overhaul, remember that there's still smoke, hot gases, products of combustion within the area of origin or the building. So we should keep your SCBA on your back and be wearing your face piece whenever practical. The charged hose line should remain on every fire floor during the overhaul operations. That's just in case you do find a pocket of hidden fire, then there's a hose line in place to knock that fire down. So here are some dangers to think about during the overhaul or during the fireground operations. Just think that the building's been burning for a while. So the walls, the floors, the actual integrity of the building has been compromised to a point, so be cautious. Roof members are heated, especially if they're steel. They're going to elongate, and that's going to cause walls to push or for mortar to loosen. Just look at the walls, look at the ceiling areas. If things seem like they're out of sorts, or the walls are pushed out, or the ceiling starts to sag some, or if you're working up on the roof and it feels spongy under your feet, these are all indications that the building has been weakened due to the fire that's been inside. As I said before, mortar on the walls may start to open up. Wall ties holding walls together may start to crack. You may see some movement in those. So these are just all things, mostly visual, to look for during your on-scene operations. Just looking for signs that the building has started to weaken. For detecting hidden fires, there's a few different ways we can detect those hidden fires. One could be through sight, so you're looking for the discoloration of metals, peeling of paint. You may find smoke pushing from cracks in the wall or cracks in the mortar. The wallpaper starts to ripple. You may have the brown area, it's just showing a heat signature behind that area. You may see actual charring. You can also use touch or feel the wall, feel for heat, and then also using thermal imaging cameras for detecting heat, or you may find some departments that still use a small heat gun. So during overhaul, please again just understand building construction, understand how the building is built. So this refers back to your building construction section of Truck Pert, also back to your basics program. Understand that the more the fire burns within a sealed space, the more heat you're going to have in that space. So if you never open it up, never get the heat out, the heat's going to continue to increase, and that's generally where rekindles occur. Is there was a spot in the building that nobody opened up, the fire just lays there for a while, and then what you think was just smoke or steam at one point turns into visible fire after a few hours. So watch out for weight-bearing or load-bearing members during your overhaul operations. Where I'm referring to this is floor joists, whether they're from the basement to the first floor, or floor joists from the second floor to the third floor, or any interior vertical structural components. Just be cautious with those. If they are involved in fires, just be cautious working around those. If they're burnt through, that's just something you want to make aware to everybody, because that's ultimately keeping the structure up. And if for one of those fail, it could be detrimental to the entire crew working inside the building. If you're working with, or let's say there's mattresses or any other furniture within the building, large components, they may need to be removed from the building to be completely extinguished. That's something that your officer will make a determination. Though, whenever you start moving large items from the building, be very cautious as far as its effect it may have on the fire investigation. I'll go into that in just a little bit. So we need to protect evidence for the fire marshals. Okay, so what they're looking for during their investigation is the first fuel that was ignited, some sort of a heat source that would have ignited those fuels, and then whatever act or omission brought everything together to create the incident. So let's say you're working in a bedroom, and it seems like as you work from the door of the bedroom, in closer to the wall or in closer to a corner, the damage starts to increase. Okay, there's a good chance that increase in damage may be leading you towards the area or the point of origin, and this is something that needs to be protected, and the fire marshal needs to be advised of that. Okay, so to me, as one of the fire marshals, water doesn't concern me, so I'd rather you put a copious amount of water on something to cool it down, to knock the fire down, or limit the spread. I'd much rather use water than your axes and your hooks, because the more you disturb, the more you move around, then it's really just a disruption of evidence, and it's something that it could have a detrimental impact on the fire investigation. Okay, so, and generally during these operations, you're going to have an officer with you, whether it's captain, lieutenant, chief, that they can direct you during the overhaul operations. And if they see something that seems like it might be important for the fire marshal, then they may back you away a little bit, move to a different area until somebody can get in there and at least look at it or photograph that area. So whenever you're working on the scene and you're starting your overhaul operations, a few questions you can ask yourself. Are the contents of the room as they normally are, or are things kind of moved around that seem out of the ordinary? Are the doors and windows locked or open? Is there evidence of forced entry prior to the arrival of the fire department? Are there indications of unsafe fire behavior in more than one area of origin? Are vehicles or people present in the area? And again, these may be a few questions that the fire marshal is going to come back and ask you. When you arrived on the scene, was the front door open or was the front door closed? Do you remember forcing the door, or was the door unlocked? Do you remember any cars in the driveway? Or what was the condition of the house when you got inside? Or during your overhaul operations, did anything seem out of the ordinary? Was there anything inside the house that it seemed like it was out of place? So these are just some of the questions that you may get from the fire investigator, because very common, you're going to be on the scene a lot sooner than what the fire marshal is going to be there. So you need to really be their eyes and ears as far as what you saw on the scene. A few other observations en route to the incident. Think about the time of day, the weather, or natural hazards. It's something that in the summertime we're experiencing a thunderstorm that had lightning associated with it. Were there any types of man-made barriers? Was there a car in the driveway that was blocking access? A couch or a chair pushed up against the door? Just a few things to really think about. Maybe were there people leaving the scene, or were there people on the scene acting out of the ordinary? These are all important observations that you may need to pass along to somebody else. Upon arrival, take a moment to, I'm not saying stop your operation, but try to think about what's the extent of the fire. Again, were the doors locked or unlocked? Where was the fire located at? Was the fire on the second floor coming out of a window? Was there really no smoke? Was there heavy smoke? Did you open the front door and didn't see any smoke, or you saw maybe a small fire burning in the corner? Were any containers or cans in the area? Was there a gas can laying on the front porch? Was there a gas can in the front yard? Any type of burglary tools? Maybe anybody that looked familiar to you? Or was anybody acting out of the ordinary? Again, these are just all observations when you arrive on the scene. During the fireground operations, did you smell any unusual odors? Were there any abnormal behaviors? Or of the fire or fire patterns? Were there any obstacles that were hindering your operation? So, you expected maybe the front door to be locked, but then you didn't expect the front door to also be barricaded shut. You didn't expect the front door to have screws or nails in it trying to hold it shut. You didn't expect missing boards on the front porch, on the floor, just things that seemed out of the ordinary. Did you see any types of incendiary devices? You may not be really aware of what they are. Just, I'd say you see a torch on the front porch, or a gas can, or a pack of matches, or just anything that somebody would use to voluntarily start the fire are indications of incendiary devices. Were there any structural altercations? Was the fire system turned off? Was the chain missing between the valves? It could probably go on for hours, going on different observations you may need to think about. But really, it's just whenever things seem out of the ordinary, what you're looking for. So during salvage and overhaul, just a few points to remember. The delay in overhaul may be necessary to determine the area of origin. So as we said before, if you're overhauling most of the house, the entire house is not going to be the area of origin, though it could be. But we may get into a certain area where we want you guys to dig in one spot, or work with the fire marshals in an area, but then there may be other parts of the structure that are really not a concern for the fire investigators. Just try not to disturb evidence. Fire marshal's not on the scene yet, and you talk to one of the chiefs or the officers. We have the iPads and all the apparatus, so you can start taking photos. Please try to document the scene as best you can, but hopefully somebody arrives on the scene pretty quick that's not going to stop your operations as far as overhaul. The big thing is just try to prevent rekindles. Don't get lazy. That's a good word to use for overhaul. Is we've seen quite a few times people get lazy on overhaul, and that's generally when you end up back with a rekindle. Okay, so you really got to dig in. You really got to tear the building apart. So if you don't have any questions, go ahead and complete the quiz. The SurveyMonkey quiz located in the description section of the YouTube video. And again, we'll see you on the training grounds. Thank you.